Glad to have you with me. If you want to jump into the best conversation in talk journalism, it's right here at 866-439-5277. Emails, go to talk@LarsLarson.com. And a warm welcome to Michael Johns, President and Executive Director of the Tea Party Community and former speechwriter for President George Herbert Walker Bush. How you doing, Mr. Johns?
I'm good, Lars. How are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you on the program, and I'm doing very well, but I'm wondering, why the heck is Jeb Bush still in this race at this point?
Over $100 million in special interest donations that have afforded him a lot of airtime, and I think probably some degree of personal pride or challenge as it relates to his historical relationship with Rubio. I think if you really pressed, I would suspect that he's acutely aware that the chances of him securing the nomination are minuscule. And I saw the CNN poll that came out today in South Carolina, and there too he's not faring well. So
isn't he around 10?
It's a good question. It's a very good question.
Is he maybe at 10 points in South Carolina?
Well, CNN has him at exactly 10, which of course Trump's at 38. So, and the story nationally, as you well know, is pretty comparable to that. I think, unfortunately, he's been, or fortunately, I guess, depending on what your political inclination is, that he's really just not been the person for this moment. And I have been actually very supportive of Donald Trump. And I've told people who question me on that. Yeah, I'm ecstatic to hear that, because I've gotten a little bit of pushback from many conservatives who say, well, what about all this past and the history? And I'm acutely aware of all these things, and I'm sure you are. And this was a pretty deliberative decision on my part, feeling that Trump is the right person for this moment, for 2016. If this had been 2006 or if it were 2026, I might have a very different view on it, but I just think he has many of the leadership skill sets, the demeanor, and I think the issues that he's at the front are really at the core of the demise of the middle class of this country. And if we don't solve that issue, I just don't. It's almost like nothing else is going to matter, because we're not going to have much of a country left.
See, I think you're right from both a financial standpoint and economic standpoint for the country, and also from a political standpoint, because if we don't resolve this issue over people coming into our country illegally and establishing de facto citizenship, and that's effectively what they've done. They've got everything but voting rights. And so, yeah,
absolutely. And it's almost like whatever issue you consider the most important confronting the country, in some way the country's negatively affected by our apparent unwillingness to defend our southern border and to permit people to overextend visas. So clearly there's a national security threat.
Yep.
I think, as everyone's acknowledged. Those who've watched the H-1B visa abuse and that are following the number of employed illegals in this country can clearly see that. I think there were numbers that showed almost every job created since 2000 has been equal to the number of jobs created for illegals. So we've essentially had no job growth in 16 years in the country. And then, of course, the drain on public resources and the more sensitive topic of just general assimilation. I mean, I see some of these public schools that are bragging that they have 25 languages spoken in their school, and isn't that great? Well, no, not really. Terrible. It's not great. It's not great. I think it creates an immense challenge for kids when they're trying to focus on learning to the environment where essentially the language challenge is at the forefront of almost everything.
No, you're right. So and let's throw drugs in there as well. Virtual drugs, addictive, illegal drugs, are coming in from Mexico. The DEA says that's meth, it's heroin, it's cocaine, and those three are decimating American communities, not just the immediate effects of people who overdose, but the people who steal, the people who engage in violence either against each other. Imagine, I've had people call the show and say, why don't we legalize drugs? And I say, okay, do you know anybody who's ever been on meth? Yeah. Now imagine a whole community full of people on meth. I mean, you might as well be watching episodes of The Walking Dead.
Well, it just seems like, and obviously anyone who followed the New Hampshire primary knows that in New England particularly, the heroin situation is an epidemic. I mean, there's just a huge number of people with addiction issues and a lot of overdoses. And I almost look at the Democratic debate and I say, how can you even with a straight face say that you're serious about addressing America's heroin epidemic if you're not serious about securing that border? It's really the first step. And I think it's correctly said, it's always the easiest step. I mean, the intellectual objection to securing the border, because everyone sort of disputes the fact that it should be secure, even though, as you correctly say, there's politics behind it and they don't want it secure. But the reality is it's really not a terribly complicated thing to do.
Nope.
And, and it's been going on. We've had this debate now for 3 decades.
Do you know, Michael, one of the things I was so happy to hear him say, because for 15 years, I first saw Israel's wall and fence between terrorists and a peace-loving country 15 years ago, and I started talking about it on the air, saying, hey, Israel got it done in 4 or 5 years. They built a 500-mile-long fence, and it isn't keeping out people who want, low-income jobs. It's keeping out people who are terrorists, who are killers, and it caused the problem to drop by 95%. So you say, oh, bigger fence, bigger ladder. That's not the way it worked for the Palestinian terrorists. Terrorist incidents went down by 95%. And Trump was the first guy to bring it up.
Do you ever hear, I imagine with your callers, et cetera, you probably do hear this. You ever notice what the argument of those who don't want the wall built is? They'll always sort of kind of gravitate, well, there's still going to be some people that get over this 99% security. If we could secure it, it's not a leap what we have right now, which is essentially none. And I do believe we could have 100% security. I think that wall can be created as Trump has proposed in a way that will be uniformly and universally secure, which is what we need. And on every issue, I mean, how can you say you're serious about the war on terror if you're not serious about the border?
Well, and
you have ISIS who's specifically promised and committed to the fact that they intend to infiltrate the country through the border. And they're on record.
We've never had a president who's been willing to stand up and advocate. We've had a Congress that's passed a bill that says build some more fence or build some more wall. But if we had a president who woke up every day and said, I promise to get that wall built, as Trump has said he will, and then he went down and he said, well, I've demanded Congress do it, and they're not making progress on it, and I want you to light up their phones. If he did that every day for the first 3 months he was in office, how long do you think it would take to break down the real conspiracy, and I see a conspiracy here, between the right and the left to say we don't want to build the wall. We have to make the right noises to our various constituencies, but we really don't want to build the wall. And as long as the president and everybody else and the mainstream media stay quiet about it, we don't have to build the wall.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you have a Democratic Party that really doesn't want to talk about it because they see, they say 12 million illegals.
I 30.
See numbers.
30
it could be up to. Yeah, I was going to say it could be up to 30 million, even more. I mean, how would we even know where that number comes from? And so therefore, they see 40 million new voters there, and of course, they're now increasingly spread out into, even states that have been traditionally Republican states and states that are very much under. That are contested. And then, obviously, one of the things as a Tea Party, being one of the Tea Party co-founders and being a national leader in the movement that really drew me to the movement, despite all of my Washington experience, was this recognition that the awakening I personally have had that these parties are businesses unto themselves, and the Republican Party has been vastly too influenced by the money of big business.
Absolutely right. Michael, thank you so much. I'm up against the break. You're listening to The Lars Larson Show.
The Lars Larson Show.